Nobody's ever gonna take your place. Yeah, I think we should meet in the middle. I follow you cause you're the light of the day. I need you like you need me, it's so simple. It's so simple.
Welcome back to the Gen X Juggler podcast. As always, I'm so glad you're here. I have a very special guest on the podcast today to discuss an issue that has touched or will touch so many of us Gen Xers. First, let's get the legal stuff out of the way. The information presented in this podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice in any field, including legal, medical, financial, or mental health. The views expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host and/or producers. Rayann and I met when she became the office manager at an insurance office where I was working in 2011. She was great to work for and quickly became a good friend. I learned a lot from her. She's one of those people who sees a problem and quickly comes up with the best solution. She has this beautiful quality of being kind, fun, and no nonsense all at the same time. I would have thought nothing could shake her. But when the people we love start having significant and unexpected health challenges, we all get a little shook. Rayann joins me today to talk about her personal experience with the challenging moments we all may face as our parents get older. She also offers some words of wisdom on how we can be more prepared when that time comes. Welcome, Rayann.
Thanks, Debbie. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. So you and I have been in a similar situation of recent years or recent year where we have our parents getting older and we are having to help them out a little more than maybe we even thought when we looked into the future.
So true. It is something that, as we were talking before we came on air, it's something that is going to happen, but there's no schedule for it, which I live and die by my calendar. I like spontaneity and I like surprises, but I like surprises that are fun. I don't like surprises that
Yes.
involve my mom getting sick or being hospitalized. 24 was my indoctrination year.
So tell me a little bit about 24 and how you got indoctrinated into this new phase of life.
Awesome. Well, I'll kind of go back a little bit. I moved from my hometown in the Texas Panhandle to Oklahoma for a boy. My mom was 80. Yeah, 80 years old. And she's not your typical 80-year-old. My dad passed away in 2005. Mom has a boyfriend of now 5 years. And they are very active social life. They go to church together. She just was doing great. And then last July, I went to visit my best friend in Tennessee for a couple of weeks, the end of July, first week of August, then spent a third week away from home that wasn't planned, but I got to go stay with my brother's kids who were very young and spent a week there. And the very day that I was flying home, I was literally getting my bags together to go to the airport in Austin. And I heard my mom's voice. Andy had put it on speaker and she said, "Well, I'm in the hospital." And I just stopped and I thought, oh crap, because she had some mobility problems. And that's really what led to this. Her knees were giving her fits and her doctor didn't want her to have surgery. So because of her age and her health challenges. So consequently, she fell and broke her right hip. So instead of flying home to Oklahoma, I flew to Amarillo, is where I'm from. And they already had her in the hospital. Her boyfriend, who is 79 and precious, I love him. He doesn't have any family up there. So I'm his daughter too. So I was just accustomed to going and doing with them and kind of being the third wheel in their events. And this really brought everything to a screeching halt. She had partial hip replacement the next day, spent, I don't know, a couple of weeks in the hospital, then a couple of weeks in rehab, and came home pretty defeated. And that was really hard to watch because, not only do you have the issue at hand and insurance and bills and, making sure everything's fine at her house to come home to, and then you bring her home and she was very, very depressed, which, I tried to be a good cheerleader, But I also had to be firm with her. There's that, that role reversal that happens. And when she wanted to just sit in her chair and let me do everything for her. And you can't do that. Your muscles atrophy. All of us have that happen if we have an injury or
Yes.
something. And so we had some, so we had some pretty heated discussions because I'm a person that says, this needs to be done. You need to do it. I mean, that's that manager coming out of me. It's black and white. We're going to not look at the gray area.
Mhm.
And I'm a businesswoman. My mom is an artist, and she lives on feelings. She lives on intuition. And, she kind of, don't tell her this, but I call her strawberry shortcake behind her back because everything's puppies and rainbows and kittens and, not a lot of critical thinking and planning that goes on in her precious mind. So it was oil and water there for a while. Thankfully, I manage a medical clinic in Amarillo. So typically my month looks like I'm home in Oklahoma and I work 3 weeks remotely, and then I come back and spend a week with mom at her house and I work in the clinic, which is perfect for me because it checks all the boxes for me. So mom goes through this, we get her out of the hospital, and things are rocking along okay. Now on October 3rd, I was thinking, oh, I'll probably get to go home around the 10th of October. That wasn't going to be too terribly bad. October 3rd, I've gone to the clinic an hour early. I went at 6:30, and I don't normally go that early, but thankfully, my little brother calls my mom. He's the good child. He calls her every morning and talks to her while he takes the kids to school. And I got a phone call about 7:30 from him, and I answered it. I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he said, "Mom's having a stroke. You need to get to the house." Well, that's how my dad died in 2005.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
so immediately I dropped everything. I text the doctor for whom I work and our staff. I said, "I'm locking up the clinic. My mom's had a stroke. You're going to have to do without me. I don't know what's going on." So if you know Amarillo, Texas, I made it from I-40 in Georgia to 45th and Bell in 6 minutes in 7:30 traffic. I
Oh
was a
my
big
goodness.
old Dodge pickup. I'm driving a million miles an hour. I'm honking. I got the flashers on. I've called 911 in the meantime, and I pull up to her house and jump out, and the firefighters pull up right behind me, and I bust through the door, and mom is sitting in this chair that I bought her, and the look on her face when we walked through the door, if looks could kill, I'd be dead now. She looked at me, she
Oh
said,
no.
"What have you done?" And I said, "Mom, Andy said he thought you were having a stroke. I told him not to call you, and you weren't supposed to call 911." And I said, "Mom, we're just if you're having a stroke, we need to go to the hospital." Now, I said earlier, she and I are like oil and water. I will kill or die for her, and she would do the same for me, but we also can be each other's, the thorn in your side. Not meaning to. I was just like my dad. My little brother's just like my mom, and mom and I just kind of clash. But this instance, it was all fear driven, and she was embarrassed, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But she looked at me, and by this time the two paramedics are in there. She looked at me, she said, "I am never talking to you again." And she wasn't being funny. She's kind of a flirt and she likes an audience, but she wasn't being funny. And then she looked at all of the first responders, and she'd take her finger and she said, "And I don't like any of you." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, who
Oh
are
no.
you?" Because this is not my mother who loves an audience. So I said, "I think we need to go to the hospital." And we went through probably 10, 15 minutes of she just was digging in. And finally I said, "Please do this for me." And thank God. And I know that first responders are trained to handle situations like that much better than the rest of us. But all 6 of them were wonderful. The firefighters were very gentle with her. They said, "Let us just check you out." So they did, and I guess the head guy said, "We really think you need to go to the hospital." And of course the paramedic and the EMT, they concurred, and um, she said, "Well, I will go, but I'm not going with them." Meaning she's not going in the ambulance. And I said, "But you'll
Mhm.
ride with me." She said, "I'll think about it." They convinced her to go with me, and so I got her loaded up, and I took her through the emergency room, told them what had happened. It turns out that after about a day and a half, about 36 hours at the hospital of testing, she had what they call a TIA, which is a mini stroke. And thankfully she came out of it. But as I experienced with my daddy in 2005 when he had his first stroke, he had a stroke, and then basically the exact same thing. He had a mini stroke on a Saturday, and then the following Sunday week, he died of a catastrophic stroke. So
Oh,
in
wow.
that week, I saw his personality change, and mom's changed too. She became much more belligerent. And I know I had a lot of praying that I did and a lot of soul searching because, as I said earlier, I'm a manager. I'm like, if here's the problem, let's find the solution and let's act on it. And she didn't want to be pushed, and I had to really pull back and think about her. John even came from Oklahoma that day that it happened, and we spent the first 24 hours with everybody and their dog trying to convince her that I was not the devil, trying to make her do what
Oh,
she
wow.
didn't want to. He finally said, Celia, she loves you, and she was just doing the best she knew how to do at the time. And so we made medicine, I guess, the next day. So we got her out. That was on a Wednesday morning. We got her out Thursday around 4 or so, got her home. And she and I had a good talk. Said, she said, I know you're trying to help. And so we're all singing Kumbaya. So Friday morning at 7, I'm getting ready and my phone rings and it's Bubba, her boyfriend. And he is a retired trauma surgeon. I answered and I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I need to go to the ER. And I said, now they live in different houses, of course, because they're not married. And I said, okay, I'll call 911. He said, no, I need for you to come to my house. He's very much like me, very particular. Things have to be a certain way. And so he said, I need you to come and let's get some things together. And then you can call 911. He'd fallen out of bed because he had an infection in his leg. So fast forward to December 9th. So I'm still there because I am now scared. I am I'm going to work and I'm going to doctor's appointments with her, but I am thinking, dadgummit, this is fast forwarding for me. And I knew it was for her and for him. And then he got out of the hospital. Then we put him back in December 6th. We didn't get him out until like the 10th of January because he spent time in rehab. He's had 3 hospitalizations, 2 surgeries, and a partridge in a pear tree. You think this is going to happen if your parents live to be older, but you're never prepared for it, and certainly they are not prepared for it. So man, I learned a lot about patience with her and with him. I learned that I need to handle things with a much softer approach than I tend to do. I'm great if you have an emergency, I'm the one that you want to call because I can handle it, but I'm going to handle it. I mean, I had a friend in high school who was on the back of a motorcycle, and a guy was cleaning his deer rifle as they went by, and it went off. He didn't think it was loaded. It went off and shot James's arm in half. I was in the car behind him. I was the person that went in. They took him into his friend's house that lived next door to us. Took me, and they're just standing there, and James is bleeding out. Well, I used my hands as a tourniquet, and I said, "You guys have to call 911." So, in that situation, calm, cool, and collect. I knew exactly what to do. Um, everything was fine. But when it's your mama and your dad,
Mhm.
it's scary. And so that I guess that's really what shocked me was the emotion that was just welling up in me, and every emotion, was just coming out. And
Yes.
I handled it, but I don't think that I handled it as best I could. So, but I learned. I learned.
But the important thing is you handled it, and it worked out well, ultimately. She needed you in that moment, but it's so hard for our parents. We talk about our role reversal, how all of a sudden we were taken care of, and now we are the ones taking care of them, and it does happen so fast. But also, it's a role reversal for them too, because
Oh yeah, yeah.
I know better than my kid. I always know better than my kid. I'm the mom, and that makes total sense. But then kid is scared and runs in guns a-blazing to try to help. Yeah, I totally understand that.
In my professional life and in my personal relationships, I always have tried to think about the other person's feelings, but I don't know, this is horrible to say, but it doesn't come naturally to think about your parents' feelings in that situation for them. And I don't mean that in a terrible way. I'm not a hard-hearted person, but all I was thinking about was, making sure that they had their medical attention. I wasn't thinking about how they were being impacted at the time.
That's totally understandable. It's like when we're little kids, if we're choking, our parents will yank us up by the first limb they can grab, and they'll worry about how that felt or how scary that was later. They're gonna save us. And I think
Right.
that's the same attitude that we have.
It was. In fact, I remember saying to Mom when she was sitting in her chair, digging her heels in, not going to the hospital, and then I said, "Look, you can get happy in the same pants you got mad in, but you're going to the hospital." She just looked at me. And so I'm sure that was like, "Well, I'll show you. I'll just be real hard." But you're right. I mean, they're used to caring for us. We're not used to caring for them. We're used to loving them, and we're used
Yes.
to listening to them.
Yep.
And so when you are put in a position where you're making the decision for that person who's 24 years older than you are, it feels very foreign, but it is something that I just encourage. Since this all happened, I've encouraged all of my friends to really um, have these talks with their parents that are really not easy to have. Mom has never wanted to talk about her mortality. I'm just now working on a living trust and getting wills and stuff. I always am telling my friends that I would think it would be better for them to have these discussions with their parents about what their wishes are. Um, so you prepare for this as best you can. You can't prepare for it. But I guess I liken it to being a first responder. You don't know what you're going to when you get that call, when the alarms go off. You don't know what you're getting into. They're probably much better prepared. But when it's your family, it's a whole different ballgame. So I just think that if you can have these talks with your parents, your aunt, your uncles, your grandparents, whatever, about what their wishes are, because like if they want a DNR, those things have to be in place. There needs to be medical powers of attorney. And so that's kind of where I focused my frustration was. Then I started looking at, okay, what documentation do we need to make this easy for Mom and easy on me and my brother, and for Bubba. He doesn't have kids, and so I'm doing the same thing for him, and he's agreeable. But having a discussion of when this time comes, if you have to be taken from your home to the hospital, please know that when this happens, I'm making decisions and I'm asking you to do things you don't want to do out of love and fear.
Yes, that's exactly right. Fear over someone you love it's just multiplied.
When I get afraid, which is not very often, but when it comes to my mama, I can be a stinker about her, but nobody else better. And there isn't anybody better to take care of her than me. you know?
Yes, I totally understand that feeling, and yeah, that's that fierce love, and it does require the tough conversations to get everybody on board, and I think we don't do that enough, just like you said. There's so many things that my parents and I should have discussed further before I started taking on more of their medical care and helping them make more decisions because they are still adults with their own minds.
Exactly. And you don't want them to, they don't want to give up their independence. When you started having to do that, Debbie, did you have to, did you want to have these discussions with them, but didn't know how to approach them?
I didn't ever want to have conversations with my parents about, getting sick or end of life. I just wanted them to enjoy every day, and I also honestly, I didn't wanna think about it. I didn't want to think about my parents getting older and how that would impact their health and being without them one day. That's just not a place I wanted to focus, but I should have been an adult.
We've gotten past that hurdle, and which is good. So now we just need to have a few more discussions, and I hope that it's years before we even have to have another health episode or anything like this again. But who knows? She'll be 83 in August, and he'll be 80 in August, or in September and August, um, and that's what's really weird too. So I am very close to Bubba, her boyfriend, but then you have to have these, you have to have discussions about their physical goings on, and that's uncomfortable with your mom, really uncomfortable with your mom's boyfriend. It's really weird to say mom's boyfriend when they're in their 80s, but I'm now one of his medical powers of attorney because I'm the only one that's close. Everybody else is in Houston. And so I can get there if I'm not there already in 3 hours. But I mean, I've had to help him up when he's fallen. There's just a lot. And that's the dignity. I guess that's really the crux of it is there comes a time when their dignity is, I don't know, compromised. I don't know if that's the correct word, but is damaged, maybe.
I think it's more of maybe a feeling on their part because those of us who are helping them don't see them with any less dignity. But it's hard when you're the one receiving the help to not feel less dignified in those moments for sure.
Exactly, exactly. I have a close friend from Dalhart that just had a double mastectomy. She had breast cancer, and she didn't have any kids, and her dad is older and lives in Arizona, and so um, again, because I'm the new 911, I decided that I would be the one to be with her during her surgery and then go home with her. And we talked about that as well because we're close. We're like sisters, but I had to help her shower. I had to see her in a light that I had never seen her before. I had to help her get undressed. I had to help her dress. I had to, you know, deal with her incisions and the drains and stuff. And she and I talked about this very thing. She said, "Well, gosh, you've had a lot of education in in these last few months, haven't you, as far as people's health and how it makes them feel and how, you want to help them, but you have to just really think about um, them first, the way they feel first, and then second, you take care of the matter at hand, whether it's helping them shower or helping them, walk and just learn to walk again, or um, learn to use that new hip. So it's been a
Wow.
really educational several months, but I feel I'm a much more patient person. And I've always considered people. I'm very in tune with how people feel. I can read people real well, but I don't know that I've always been a person who was as empathetic as I could be. So that has helped me become more empathetic and sympathetic, I hope.
That's true. Like hard situations change us, but they can change us for the better. Piggybacking off of what you were saying earlier, the whole thing gets easier if you plan ahead and operate out of preparedness and not blind fear for the safety and health of your loved one. What would you say is the most important or are the most important steps to take before we get to this point?
I think there's two very, very simple things. First is use this podcast, this episode as the catalyst, as saying, hey, mom, dad, I was listening to a podcast the other day and these ladies were talking about what they've gone through, when their family members had these emergencies and how that kind of unfolded, and say, I was listening to this. What do you think? What do you want to do? Do you have documentation? What hospital do you want to go to? This hopefully would open up a conversation where you're talking about what their wishes are, but you're also finding out, if you don't already know, do they have wills? Do they have power of attorneys? I have found that a living trust is really a really good way to go. In fact, I went on to, I think it's rocketlawyer.com, and got a pretty inexpensive deal where I'm doing these documents for her. But that's starting that conversation. I know this isn't comfortable for you to talk about, mom and dad, but what are your wishes? What hospitals do you like to go? You may not even have that. You may not even, they may be super healthy. So you've never had to cross that bridge. And from that conversation, then you can talk about, well, do we need to have powers of attorney? Do you have a will? Who do you want to take care of your pets if you have to go to the hospital and maybe rehab for a while? I mean, there's so many moving parts to that whole thing.
That's so true. That is very, very good advice. And I will say, failing to plan when it's not a moment of desperation could cost you not only in sorting out the relationship and sorting out the details with your parents, but also sorting out the cost.
I'm not slamming my attorney friends, but their hourly rates are pretty dang high. So there's
They are.
there's options out there that are not as costly, and most of them, like this one that I told you about, you do have the option of having an attorney that's licensed in your state. Just look over your documentation because, like, if they have property and bank accounts, and that's the other thing I did. Thankfully, while she was in the hospital the first time, was I called our banker. We have the same banker and said, I don't want to just be a signer. You can be a payable upon death, which is fine, but who's going to pay the bills if your loved one is in a coma or they just can't do it? Um, you need to not be just a signer on the account. You need to be an owner of the account, because an owner of the account can conduct all business. But here's the catch: that representative from the bank has to go to your parent and they have to say, do you want this? And if they say no, you're not going anywhere with it. And that happened to me.
That's difficult, but it's really important to have all of that in place. You never know when your older parents are gonna be capable of taking care of their financial matters, even if it's just for a time. We hope that they can always, get better and get back on their feet.
Yeah, it came down to, I said, look, I'll put you on my account if if you'll put me on yours. Basically, it's like, here's this boy, I'll take this one,
Absolutely. Compromise is the name of the game.
And it's been a learning experience for both of us, and by the grace of God, I was there a couple of weeks ago, and I said, "How are you feeling?" She said, "You know what? I feel like I'm 65 again." I said, "Hallelujah. That is a victory. I'm very happy for you, Mom." Yeah, yeah,
I
she's doing.
love that.
People will say, "How's your mom?" I was like, "She's mean again." She's not mean, but I like to do that to her because it makes her red hair kind of flame up a little bit.
So how's Bubba doing now?
Thanks for asking. He's doing pretty well. Um, the thing with him is, um, he falls all the time, and so he fell last week. We thought he broke his hand. It wasn't broken, thankfully, but I I just called him yesterday and I said, "I heard you had a little tumble, and I just want to ask you to do this for me. Please use your walker. I know you don't want to use it, but take it with you everywhere you go. It's more stable, you'll be more sturdy, and you won't have these spills that interrupt the things that you're doing that make you happy." But you know what's awesome? God works in great ways. Every time he falls, every time out in public, which is often, unfortunately, there's either a fire truck there and the firefighters get out and help him, or there's off duty firefighters having lunch together or breakfast every single time. That's a God thing. How are your parents? Are they doing okay?
They're doing really, really well. They have come through a lot this year, and they're finally getting to the point where they're feeling good. I also say, "Please use your walker. Please use your walker," because 'cause I've seen both of them fall at different times, and it is so scary.
I think the big thing is making it a discussion with them as a party to it, instead of you preaching to them or mandating.
Yes, mandating to our parents in our 50s goes over about as well as mandating to them in our teens. They're
That is
still our parents.
that is perfectly said. Yep, that is perfectly said.
Rayann, thank you for coming on the podcast today. I've enjoyed visiting with you so much. You've given us all a lot to think about and a lot to look into, and we'll be more prepared because of it. Thank you.
I'm tickled to death for you, and, if anybody needs to talk, you can get my number from Debbie.
That's right. We can start a support group right here and now.
Amen. Amen, sister.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and I really appreciate you taking the time for us today.
It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. That does it for this episode of the Gen X Juggler podcast. Rayann and I hope that you've come away from this episode with some good information and that it can be a catalyst for those important conversations we all need to have with our parents. Rayann is truly interested in starting a support group for those caring for aging parents. If you're interested in connecting with her, email me at genxjuggler@gmail.com and I'll get you connected. I'll link my email in the description. I look forward to our next time together. Until then, friend, let's keep on juggling.
Never gonna take your place. Yeah, I think we should meet in the middle. I follow you 'cause you're the light of the day. I need you like you need me, it's so simple. It's so simple.